Welcome to my channel, and today's video we're going to talk about some of the concepts that the people will talk in different way in the real-time world. So maybe you can say like a terminology. When I say terminology in the sense, maybe that particular concept or particular way of writing the query, you might already aware of it. But when it comes to the people, so they use it in different technology. That's the where we always will get confusion, right? So you might think that, okay, this concept is new to the DAX or new to the Power BI or new to the Tabular Cube. Then you will simply say, feel like I don't know, right? So to avoid that confusion, I would like to cover few terminologies that people will talk in different way in the DAX world. So the first one is the um, iterating functions. People might ask you like, hey, what are the iterating functions? Then you feel that, okay, I don't know. But yeah, so you might worked on these functions previously, but you feel that you didn't know that, right? So the iterating functions is one of the uh, function set, okay, where the each function ending with x, right, like sum x, average x, and rank x. Not only that, we have other functions, right? So count x, max x, min x, product x. All these are the iterative function because they do the operations at row level. Now the next concept is what is the difference between the measures and calculated columns. And then there is a third concept called context, whether the particular query is related to the row context or query context or filter context level. And then last one is the implicit and explicit measures. So definitely we need to know this difference between the implicit and explicit measures. So let's cover into the detail of each terminology. Okay, first one is the iterating function, as I stated starting of this video. So any function that end with x or any function that do the operation at row level, it's called iterative function. So the best examples are like sum x, average x, and min x, and max x, all those. So all these are like aggregated functions. In fact, I covered how these aggregated functions can be used in the DAX in my other video. The link is already provided in the description section. Please go through that aggregated functions and see how these sum x and average x functions works. But coming to the rank x is actually one of the statistical function, but we use it in our regular scenario to define the rank for the transactions. Okay, so basically, iterating function. The operation, as I mentioned, so it will happen at row level, the criteria and everything. Then it will be defined based on the your business use case. Now let's see example with respect to the rank x, how it works with the queries. Okay, basically this is the rank x syntax. It will take the table as a parameter, and expression is nothing but it can be writing like your standard measure, or you can write any newly defined measure based on the sum x or average x. And then value parameter, so based on this value parameter you can sort your data, and you can define your order by. So whether you want to define the ranking based on the measure ascending format or descending format, that you can define. So now take the examples here. I just given one example. What I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to provide the ranking for my geo country codes based on the sales net USD. But if you look at here, the ranking is not applied correctly. It's showing that for all countries it is 1, and this blank country it's showing as 305305, because we are trying to rank it by using the default options where we selected the fact sales, and the fact sales will have a lot of data, right? So based on all the records it's ranking up, so which is wrong. So now our expectation is we need to create a ranking based on the buyer geo country code. So in my second example, I just instead of the fact sales, I given the dim buyer geo as my ranking table. Based on that, I told to query that fetch the ranking. So now you can see here, based on the geo country code, so the rankings are defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we'll extend that same query little bit. Now this time I want to provide the ranks based on my sales amount by ascending format. Now what will happen? It will do the ascending of the sales net USD based on the geo country, and then start giving the ranking. So you can see here the lowest sales value got the first rank, the highest sales value got the sixth rank. The similar condition for this query also, but this time I'm using the descending format now. So yeah, now it's giving the proper formats. By default, it will take ascending to descending, then provide the ranking. That's the reason there is no difference between the this result and this result. But when you want to do the ranking in ascending format, you need to write explicitly ascending. That's how it will do the sorting and provide the ranking. So that's about this ranking X function, and then this iterating function. Now we'll move on to the next terminology called difference between the measures versus calculated columns. Measures versus calculated columns. If we refer our tabular queue model, where you can see here the fact sales, right? And here I define the various measures or metrics. You can see here it will come with the first metric. It will come with sum of sales net USD. Second one is sales NDP USD, sum of prod quantity, right? So all these are actually measures because I'm giving the along with the aggregated functions. Whenever you drag and drop these columns, it will dynamically on the fly, it will sum it up the information based on your dimension attributes level and display the data. That's why we call them as measures. But coming to the calculated, the other one is the calculated columns, right? Or calculated measures. Sorry, calculated column. So basically, this will work. Calculated columns will work at row level. So for example, here I create one column, say like test one, right? And then what I'll do here, I'll define the formula here. Okay, so test one should be stating that um, it's a sales base quantity minus sales odd quantity. Now this formula is actually evaluated to the each row level. Then based on that, this column will get populated. That's the reason we call it this column as a calculated column in the tabular cube. Not only here, if you go to the Power BI also, if you apply any formula at for the specific column at row level, it's called calculated columns. That's about the difference between the measures versus calculated columns. Even we'll jump into the next one, which is the context. There are totally three types of the contexts are available. Let's get into the details. Row context is it works at current row level operation. I mean, whenever you're taking the difference between the two measures or multiple measures, and that particular formula applies at each row level, right? So the one we defined in previously, right? Here is the test one column that we defined based on the difference between the sales base quantity minus prod quantity, right? Similarly, in our DAX query, if you write any uh, formula, that differentiate the two measures and create a new column. Basically, that will happen at row level, right? So this is called, we call it simply row level context. And here it will take the difference of the two measures and populate it each row level. That's why we call it as a row level context. Whereas a query level context, so something you write some explicit query. So for example, summarizing the columns, then you're adding the columns to populate the rank X, right? So the scenario that changed the entire table data or structure of the table, we call it like a query context. That will help you to define your own structure from the base structure, and you can write your own way of logics to achieve the business logics. So that's why we call it as a query context. Filter context is nothing but it's a purely something you're completely filtering out the data. For example, you take here dim product, right? That's a dimension. From this dimension, what we are doing, we are filtering out only the bikes information based on the category. So since we use the data to filter out, then we call it as a filter context. Not only, I mean, don't think that, okay, since we apply the filter condition, that's why we call it as a filter context. Even if sometimes we can filter out our data using the calculate, right? Calculate function also. That's the way also we filter out the data. And that is also, that scenario also we call it like filter context. And then you also sometimes use some conditions within the order by clause, right? So whenever you say like order by a specific column, start from specific row, right? Whenever you mention that scenario, also we call it like a filter context. Any data, direct data that you filter out with some additional conditions, then we call it as a filter context. That's about the these three row and query and filter level context. Now we'll move on to the implicit and explicit measures. I mean, the main difference between these two measures are implicit measure is actually by default, it will populate the aggregations automatically. So you can, for them, you can simply change the aggregation by like doing with sum or average or count. But explicit measures are like customized measures where you can, it will be compiled dynamically. The best example to the explicit measure is if you go back to our tabular cube, and where you can see here we created uh, rolling n months information into the calculation group, right? So the expression that we wrote here, it works dynamically based on the selection of the time. So whatever you created the measure and the formula here, we call it this measure as a explicit measure, whereas the implicit measure is these normal measures. So you can see here you have a sum of sales net USD, right, which is coming from the fact sales, right? So these measures can be changed, dynamically. Not only sum, you can change to average, then you can create it. So these measures we call it like implicit measures. Not only that, sometimes there are the columns that are coming directly from the fact table, right? Those measures also by default it will get aggregated as soon as we drag into our application. So those measures also we call it them like a implicit measures, right? So the implicit measure is, to put it definition right, put it simply, implicit measure is just it will take the aggregation automatically on its own based on the data type and all, and you can control them by using your customized aggregations, whereas the explicit function is purely written by the complex logic and achieve that dynamically, so like based on your selection. So the best example is calculating the rolling n months information for the explicit measure. So that's about these four terminologies. I hope I explained clearly.